Fixing open source vulnerabilities in Azure DevOps using the WhiteSource Bolt extension. So, if you create a Python web app, it may be that every time you receive a new feature request or add a new functionality, you may need to test and perform a lot of steps to deploy the application again. So, Azure DevOps can help you automate that process. So, your code will automatically be tested and deployed. In case you have used several open source libraries in your application, that may lead to open source vulnerabilities and security risks. In case the libraries that you have used are no longer being maintained, that may lead to security issues. So, White Source Bolt extension allows you to identify those open source vulnerabilities and also suggests fixes to effectively deal with them. Here we will build a very simple Python app, like very simple, just to see how we can identify open source vulnerabilities in our project with Azure DevOps White Source Bolt extension. So we'll do three things: create and deploy a web app using Azure, create a CI pipeline with Azure DevOps to link our code, and integrate White Source Bolt extension with Azure DevOps. This part, creating and deploying a web app using Azure, can be done very easily with the VS Code extension for Azure App Service. We just need to debug, run and debug the application, and then we can directly click on a button to deploy it. Here we will look at a different approach for it. So first, go to the home screen and go to resource groups. Also, for people who are students and don't have credit cards, they can use Azure for education accounts, which comes with $100 free credit, and it also doesn't require a credit card. It can be like you can get it with your institute email ID. So click on resource groups, click on web app. Then it will ask you to fill some details related to your web app, like the name and the region where you want it. So fill in the same region as your compute instance and click on deploy. This is the name of my app. So in the beginning, it shows a page stating that the deployment is successful. This is the URL, that is the app name .azurewebsites.net. Right now it looks like this, but when you do it for the first time, it will show a different page as it does not have any code in it right till now. So next comes Azure DevOps. So open the page and click on create new organization. And from that organization, you can create a project which can be either public or private. So here it is very important to note that in public projects, the number of parallel builds that we can have for Azure for education accounts and free subscriptions is zero. So for public projects, the number of builds we can run is zero. So it's not useful. So we need to go with private, which gives us one parallel run at a time. So we click on private and create project. So you'll come to this screen which looks like this. These are where the organization names are, and you can click on your project, and here it provides a summary of the project. Like you can add a project description to describe your project, and you can push your existing code on from a GitHub repository to Azure DevOps here. So I have created a very simple sample repository with a simple Flask app and requirements. So here, It has an app.py file and a requirements.txt file. This is the GitHub repo. So next in the dashboard, that is here, navigate to repos. I have already connected the code, that's why it looks like this. Initially, it will look like this. And from here, you can, there are different ways of pushing your code. So the one I will use is from here and click on generate grid credentials to get your password. And open up the terminal on your machine and clone the repo using this command. And open it up with VS Code. And then create a file called app.py and add this part of the code. And in the requirements.txt file, we will have only Flask as that's the only thing we need. And now connect it to Azure DevOps and push your code. So you could directly connect your existing GitHub repository to, and finally now navigate to pipelines and create and click on create pipeline. So here is pipeline. And this is one of the pipelines that I already have. You can click on new pipeline from here. So you create a pipeline and you will get some options that where your code is. So you'll click on Azure Repos Git and then you can select the repository. And here we have only one repository that we connected, that is test project. So click on this and you will get some options how you want to configure your pipeline. So click on Python to Linux web app on Azure and then select your web app name. So if you have several web apps deployed, it will give you a lot of options. I have only one, so I'll select it and then click on validate and configure. So the YAML file will be generated. You can click on save. After you save and run, every time you push to the main branch, because the trigger is main on the GitHub repo, the builds will run and the web application will be deployed only if the builds run successfully. You can see the status of the pipeline and jobs here. The build job is still pending in this, like when I took this screenshot. And once the app is successfully deployed, the build and deployment jobs have successfully completed. It will show this screen with the URL, which you can go to where the site will be live. So this is the site. And after the builds run successfully, this is what the pipeline will look like. Now we look at WhiteSource Bolt extension for Azure pipelines to fix, to identify open source vulnerabilities and fix them. So install the WhiteSource Bolt Azure DevOps extension from this link. And when you click on it, it will ask you to select your Azure DevOps organization, which you can select from here and click on proceed. Another step that needs to be done is go to organization settings and Azure Active Directory here in the organization settings and select a directory and click on connect. So let's look at the Azure DevOps organization dashboard, which for me will look like this. This is my organization dashboard for this organization that I have. Now you need to click on the project and go to WhiteSource Bolt. So click on test project. Click on pipelines and here is WhiteSource Bolt. Here it shows 28 days left to access WhiteSource Essentials. So that means it's already been 2 days that I have generated my WhiteSource account credentials using this a form that will be there when you open it for the first time like this. So they send you a link via mail for you to log in and you enter your name and last name to get a WhiteSource Essentials account for free from here, only for 30 days though. So you can set up your account and log in, and then you have to generate your Azure DevOps plugin activation key. And once you do that, your message for successful account creation will be displayed under this tab. Now go to your pipeline, select pipeline, and click edit. So pipelines, and here edit. So here you have to go click on the pipeline and go to the tasks section, and here you'll find WhiteSource Bolt extension, and click on it. It will open this snippet of code that will be added. So here the project name is optional. I chose to leave it empty. You can also put it, and you can click on add. A snippet of code will be added to the place where your cursor is. So for me it got added to the beginning, but of course it won't be there. It will be after the build jobs run. So here is the white source task. Now go to pipelines and select the run for which you want to check white source bolt open source risk report. So here pipelines, and yeah, and click on this white source bolt tab. Yeah, so the number of vulnerable libraries are 1, and the vulnerability risk is medium. This is where you can see. But initially it will be 0, as we had only the Flask library, which was the latest version, and there was no risk in the beginning. So as we have only one dependency, no vulnerabilities are detected. This tells our project has no risks. So now let's see what happens if we have some deprecated frameworks in our in our project which we have used. So here I introduced two new libraries just to test: HTTP lib2, which is of version 0.9.2, and cryptography 2.1.4, which both are deprecated. So again, you can deploy like run your pipeline with the updated requirements.txt file, and like because you push it, like after you make a change and push it, it will automatically trigger the pipeline. And after the build runs and the deployment is completed, you can check the white source bolt open source risk report. And now you will see, because of the changes that we made in the requirements.txt file, the vulnerability risk now is high with 3 vulnerable libraries, and severity distribution is 3 for high, 3 for medium, and 0 for low. So in the inventory, obviously it shows all the libraries with their licenses, and it under the security vulnerabilities tab, it shows the libraries, the severity, the vulnerability, the date, the library name, as well as the top fix that is suggested. So this shows all the vulnerabilities, and now let's click on one of these links to see what kind of fixes have been suggested. Here, this is for cryptography and this is for HTTP lib2. So here we need to go for a version like 0.19.0, which will be fine. So we'll do that in a small time. So also you can also take a look at these license risks that you have, and all the different kind of licenses that have been used in frameworks used in your project. And now let's update the cryptography library to version 3.3.2 as suggested by the WhiteSource Bolt extension risk report fix. So now this is what the requirements.txt file will look like. And then we commit and push to the main branch. And again, it will trigger the pipeline. And finally, the white source bolt risk report will be generated, which now shows the vulnerable libraries have decreased from 3 to 2. The risk is still high, but the number of so the severity distribution is 1 for high and 2 for medium. So that means that the fix that we uh, put in this, the upgradation of the library version worked. So next, let's update HTTP LIB to 0.19.0 as suggested by the fix here. This is the link that was given. So update requirements.txt file to look like this. and then we commit and push, and this again shows of the new open source test report that has been generated from the current pipeline run shows that the vulnerabilities now has reduced from hard like high to medium, and the vulnerable libraries are only one, and one medium severity distribution. So this fix that we made also worked. So that's all about WhiteSource Bolt, and you can integrate your Azure pipeline with the WhiteSource Bolt extension to be informed of open source vulnerabilities in your project and fix them effectively. Yeah.